Yes, there's the physical mute on the machine.
Okay, there's an echo. Who's got their mic on? That was Nikita, we're on. Okay, yep.
Are we ready? Okay. Welcome to the March meeting of the Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Jurcek is excused, and I am here. We will begin with the first order of business, which is the approval of the minutes from the September 23rd, 2024 meeting. A copy of the minutes and the accompanying draft resolution are located in the board book under tab 1. Since we don't have a quorum, we won't do that at this time. Our next action is to review the BFSA's preliminary 2025-2026 budget and related 4-year financial plan and to authorize its posting for public comment. We are not approving the budget at this time, but rather are approving the document to be posted for public review and comment. This document will be posted on the BFSA's website and provided to all city public libraries for public posting. Any public comments received on the budget will be forwarded to this committee. The preliminary budget is also provided under tab 1 of this board book, along with its draft resolution. Jeanette, will you provide any comments for me?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to express my gratitude to our Comptroller, Claire Waldron. Thank you for all of your work that went into developing the budget as presented today. The draft budget as presented is fiscally responsible. It was constructed with a focus on keeping costs for operating our organization as low as possible. Staff-related expenses constitute the majority of our budget at 80%. There's some costs included in staff-related expenses that are rising outside of our control. The first one is pension costs. They're budgeted to increase 18.7% over last year, and that's based on projections provided by the Office of the State Comptroller. And the second highest increase, which is also outside of our control, is health insurance, which is budgeted to increase 12.1%. We do participate in the insurance programs as provided by the state. We were able to offset these increases with a decrease in professional fees, with the largest for arbitrage analyses, and this is a result of, as we pay off our debt, requiring less of those analyses. The BFSA continues to financially benefit from our physical office move in December of 2022 to our current space. So not only are we paying less than what was in negotiations with our previous landlord for, but we're also benefiting from the technology that's available in this room, for example, which keeps our meeting costs lesser than what we were holding our meetings for previously. So with a combination of all of this, we were successful in maintaining a budget with a modest overall increase of 3.5%, which is approximately $33,000. And I'll take any questions on the budget you may have.
I don't have any. I want to thank everyone for the hard work that they're doing and putting together the budget. And I think it's important as BFSA that we lead the way in being financially responsible. And I think this budget does that. So I appreciate what all of you are doing. If there are any other comments or comments by the public, they should be sent to Jeanette Rowe, and they will be circulated under an updated budget as they become necessary. The approval of the final budget is scheduled for June. We will bring this then forward to the full board meeting as we go on. The next item of business is to approve Ludsman and McCormick as auditors for the BFSA for the current fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. Ludsman and McCormick have provided excellent service over the last several years. There is a fee increase of $800 over last year. The approval of this item will extend the contract for an additional year. A copy of the engagement letter and accompanying draft resolution has been provided under tab 1 in that book. When we have a quorum, we will vote on this as we go along. Any questions? Anything else anyone needs to say on our audit? No? Thank you. The next item of business is the annual reporting of the 2025, to the committee from the Internal Controls Officer regarding testing and related findings. The Internal Controls Officer is a statutory required appointment. Internal control memos are included under tab 1 of your board book. The Internal Control Officer, Bryce Link, will share his report with us now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the board for the internal controls review. The two areas that were tested this year turn it on. So the two areas that were tested this year include the document retention and storage, as well as budget preparation and approval. So we'll begin with the document retention and storage. So the following is a brief summary of the internal controls testing that I completed for the document retention and storage. Review of the processes and controls was a thorough one that has led to no material findings. Primary purpose of this review was to determine that proper documentation, retention, storage, internal control policies for records management were established and followed. So we focused on the current process for document retention compared to what is outlined under the required New York State Manual MI1 record maintenance schedule. So going back to August of 2014 when we met in consultation with Mr. McGavran, the recommendation was to use the MI1 schedule plus 1 year minimum for maintaining records. So it's noted that the MI1 record maintenance schedule is no longer in use. As of January 1st, 2020, and subsequently revised April 1st of 2022, a new retention schedule was adopted by New York State Archives. Just to be clear, BFSA has not violated law, or we have not been in compliance with the LGS-1 schedule, as BFSA has not been disposing of records lately. By adopting the new LGS-1 schedule, the BFSA can begin disposing records that have met the minimum time retention period to be retained. So the testing itself includes the detailed review of resolutions authorizing the adoption of formal retention and disposition schedule, or appointment of a records management officer, and a review of a draft disposition form. Behind this first memo is actually a copy of the draft disposition form for director's review. In the actual testing, I reviewed over 12 different sets of documents. So my testing focused on sample set of the records. It was determined through the review that staff took the appropriate steps in creating, documenting, and maintaining the records. In many cases, the records maintained by BFSA exceeds the recommended guidelines by both the MI1 retention schedule as well as the revised LGS-1 schedule. In regards to fraud, it was determined that potential to conduct fraud is possible, but very unlikely due to the number of backups and formats that the records are maintained in. Findings for the document retention schedule, it's recommended that BFSA adopts the LGS-1 schedule for the disposal of records and the use of records disposition form. Appoint a new records management officer and return to and review the subject matters list to verify that is up to date. The resolution, as well as a copy of the disposition schedule, will be moved to the next governance committee, which I believe is going to be in July, for governance to take action on this. So once that is in place, we can follow the LGS-1 schedule and begin disposing of documents that exceed the retention period. It is noted that the BFSA, in an effort to promote transparency and good governance, posts the following operational documents online, including the BFSA subject matter list, resolutions authorizing the records management officer as well as adoption of the records retention policy, our BFSA annual reports, audits, budgets, financial plans, operating procedural documents, as well as our meeting minutes and videos. That is all I had on the document retention process. Is there any questions?
No.
All right. The second area, you're welcome. The second area I tested was the budget preparation approval. Once again, thorough process in the review that led to no material findings. The budget preparation approval process is a unique one because actually I'm looking over 2 different fiscal years from a timing perspective. Currently, while I was doing the testing, the comptroller was in the process of preparing this year's budget. So I used last year's framework as well as the quarterly reports to make sure we are reporting to the board of directors in a timely manner, making sure the information is going to the directors, and as well as working with the comptroller for the preparation of this budget, reviewing revenues, revenue recognition, as well as the expenditures. So as I said, we focused on the revenue estimates for the upcoming year. In doing that, we also look at what Erie County is including in their budget, also looking at the city as well as the state to get a better sense of what other economic forecasts are out there and how applicable our revenue estimates are. And then with the expenses, in the budget review, we really follow a current service budget where we can take prior year expenditures for the most part and then adjust as needed. We saw that with the discussion earlier when it was discussed about the increase in pension and health insurance outside the control of BFSA. Then on the flip side, the reduction in the costs associated with arbitrage, or not necessarily arbitrage itself, but adjusting expenditures going forward. So reporting requirements, we have quite a few on this. So this is the first step. In March, we need approval from the board just to go forward and post the budget and financial plan 90 days prior to commencement of the next fiscal year. After it's in the libraries, libraries and posted on our website, we have a period where there's a review and comment. And then at the next AFB committee, which will be at the June meeting, is when the board of directors will take an action on the proposed budget and financial plan. And once that is done, we have 7 days prior to the next fiscal year beginning to activate the budget proposal in Paris. So in regards to fraud, the opportunity to commit fraud is limited and considered a low risk due to the segregation of duties and multiple levels of review by both staff and directors. Variables used in constructing the budget are largely drawn from public sources, and any significant deviation from those sources to what is included in the BFSA budget would draw additional scrutiny. The biggest concern that we may ever run into is really a timing between the approval of the budget and getting into Paris. So if our meeting got pushed back beyond that 7-day window, or if there was an outage on the state side with the Paris system, that could hinder our reporting requirement. We've never had an issue with that today. Findings, there are no material findings. In addition, there's no BFSA in an effort to promote transparency and good governance, post the following operational documents online: the BFSA budget and financial plan going back to 2003, BFSA resolutions authorizing posting of the preliminary budget and approval of the final budget, and then the quarterly reports are available in the director's corresponding workbook. So I know I went through that rather quickly, but if there's any questions in regards to either item on internal controls, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
So the important part is that there's no findings in either of the reports that you just did.
That is correct. There are no findings at this time, with just recommendations that under document retention and storage that when we have the opportunity, BFSA adopts the most recent schedule put out by New York State.
Did you use the most recent schedule so we would be able to compare that to the way you've done it in the past?
That is correct. I actually use both schedules because currently our policy is the MS1 schedule. So I first did a review that we're still in compliance with that. And then using my sample set, I reviewed the LGS1 schedule, and there was no variations. Really, the difference between the two schedules is the consolidation of multiple schedules under the MIS, the CO1, and a few others, all consolidated under the LGS1 schedule. There's a really significant difference between the two.
Great. So thank you. Are there any other comments for the committee? If none, we stand adjournment. Thank you, everyone.
Morning.
Morning. How you doing?
How you doing? I'm good.
I work at Medicaid. So I actually get public health, so I saw all these scams and trying to be like, hey, what cap you at?
Let me just triple
We'll
check
take all
if,
your broken sales tax.
YouTube feed is
And
picking
I'm
up
like,
audio.
thank God, your county never did that.
Yeah, but I mean, if the worst happens with, Medicaid, almost nothing anybody can do.
Yep, we're good. They offer so much, just the maximum.
We're good and we're going?
Live.
State is gonna have them cut it.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the March meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. Thank you for attending. We have one thing we'd like to do first before we get started. Our good friend and former Budget and Finance Commissioner,
Oh, I didn't.
we would like to, as we read this, and this is now official, we would like to give you this resolution and thank you for all the hard work that you've done for the city of Buffalo and how we know that you're going to continue in the Controller's office doing great work. So thank you very much for all your hard work here at BFSA.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Earlier today, the Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee met and authorized the posting of the BFSA 2025-2026 preliminary budget and related four-year financial plan in accordance with legal requirements. A copy of this document is under tab 1 in your board book. The preliminary budget and financial plan commence the public commentary period. If any director has any comments at this time, we'll record them. Are there any comments on the budget? If there are any additional comments in the next few weeks, please submit them to Jeanette Rowe, the executive director. An updated version will be circulated by email as necessary. Approval of the final budget will be requested at the June meeting. There is no board action required today on this item. After our general business items are addressed, we will go into executive session at the conclusion of this meeting. Let's begin today with the roll.
Yes, okay. Interim Vice Chair Dr. Jurasek is excused. Secretary Sloss.
Here.
Director Sanfilippo.
Here.
Mayor Christopher Scanlon is excused. And County Executive Mark Wollenhard. Thank you. At this time, we do not have a quorum.
So we can move into a committee of the whole. Any recommendations for actions by the board will be considered at the next board meeting, and we can make those recommendations today so that we don't have to go through them again. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes from the BFSA's December 11th, 2024 board meeting. Directors will find a draft of the minutes and the accompanying resolution in your board book under tab 2. Are there any corrections, changes, or deletions? Hearing none, we'll move on. Our review today includes an update of the financial plan pursuant to our resolution last month requiring the city to take action to balance the current year's budget along with the second quarterly review and the proposals within the New York State executive budget that could impact the city of Buffalo's budget. The BFA staff report on these items are located under tab 3. Bryce, can you walk us through that, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the directors this afternoon. The first slide we're going to have is the city's 2025-2028 financial plan modification. It'll be on the screen shortly. So taking a step back, you'll remember at the December board meeting, there was a resolution passed. Go to the next slide, please. There was a resolution passed requiring the city to submit a budget modification. Budget modification was not received for the financial plan. However, they did adjust their year-end estimates at the time of the second quarter. So top half of this chart, we have unfavorable revenues and resources, including the occupancy tax, cannabis enforcement fees, and use of fund balance. Those three revenues and resources totaled $21.1 million at the time of the adopted budget. Per the BFSA resolution, we determined $17.5 million of it was unfavorable and would not materialize. So at the end of the second quarter, the city adjusted those amounts down to $3.7 million, with the only true variance being the amount of fund balance left available to the city, which is $3.6 million. In addition, we identified $10 million of potentially overestimated revenues. So that's the second section of this chart. Those revenues included cannabis tax, parking meters fees, traffic violation fees, casino revenue. So at the time of the adopted budget, there was $21.4 million. The resolution estimated that $10 million of that was overestimated. The city adjusted downwards by $5.3 million. The only line that wasn't really adjusted per our recommendations was the casino revenue, as the city of Buffalo did receive $5.6 million in October 2024. The administration is currently in discussions with the New York State Division of Budget to request a advancement of the balance of $5.4 million by June of 2025. So those were the changes that were made. The next slide, went too far. All right, so on this one, this really drills down and identifies the $17.5 million that was identified by BFSA, and then the increased revenues per the city administration. In December, they had increased ARPA funds revenue replacement by $17.2 million. Their forecast at the time is they were projecting sales tax to come in higher at approximately more favorable at $647,000 for a total increase of $17.9 million for a net change of $361,000 between what was identified as unfavorable compared to where they believe those two revenue sources will be at year end. I went through that rather quickly. Do we have any questions on the modification from the city?
I could just add an item. I just want to emphasize that our board back in December passed a resolution to modify the budget. After that point in time, Common Council approved additional ARPA revenue replacement dollars that were not yet committed by the city of Buffalo. That eliminated the need to actually do the budget modifications. It was done through the ARPA action. So I just wanted to emphasize that the city did address what we were at, what the board was asking for in the resolution.
Thank you. Bryce?
Yep, nope. Bear with me, everybody, in the next couple of minutes. You're enjoying an afternoon and listening to me.
Great.
So we'll be moving on to the city's, the review of the city's second quarter. The adopted budget was a total of $617.2 million. At the second quarter, the year-end projection for all the way back.
Oh, you know?
Don't, I almost have it. Here we go. No.
Let me share the other file. I selected the wrong.
All right. So at the end of the second quarter, the city is projecting a surplus of $1.3 million. So on the revenues and fund balance side, they're projecting a favorable amount of $13.9 million, 2.3% of estimated revenues. And then on the expenditure side, there's an unfavorable variance projection of $12.6 million or 2%, which leads us to the surplus of $1.3 million.
I'm sure. Right?
Yes.
What's the basis of this $13.9 million increase?
Large portion of that is actually the ARPA dollars.
That's the ARPA money?
Yep. So I'll be getting in that. So from, if you're, no, you're fine. If you're on page 7 of the slides, you'll see a breakdown of the major revenue sources as well as transfers in and use of fund balance. Right there under intergovernmental, you'll see 32.1 million increase, and that's almost exclusively ARPA dollars there between what is being used for revenue replacement as well as funds being used for the ARPA program dollars.
Okay, so intergovernmental mostly is ARPA?
Yep. And actually, in 2 slides, I'll get into the detail of all that breakdown. And as I mentioned earlier, use of fund balance. When the city adopted the budget, they were estimating 14.9 million available in unassigned fund balance, but that was actually reduced down to 3.6 million. I'd like that to be pointed out there. And then the next slide, high level, just showing departmental expenditures compared to the adopted budget, as well as general charges. At the end of the second quarter, the city's estimating year-end positive variance of 7.1 million under departmental, with both police and fire estimated to be over budget. And then under general charges, they're estimating favorable variance of 1.9 million. You'll see under transfers out that 21.6 million unfavorable increase, and that's all attributed to ARPA program dollars flowing through the general fund. And I'll be getting into the details of both revenues and expenditures at this time. So the city at the end of the second quarter is estimating favorable variance of 25.2 million to the adopted budget. Of that 25.2, 32.1 million is the favorable variance in intergovernmental revenue due to the increase in ARPA revenue replacement funds. 17.2 of that is the revenue replacement, and then the unbudgeted program fund of approximately 16.917 million. There's also a 2.8 million favorable variance in miscellaneous revenue due to the sale of property. That was the Mohawk grant at 3.2 million. There's a 4.2 million unfavorable variance in taxes that's directly attributed to the occupancy tax not being enacted. That one does take action at the state level. It is my understanding the administration is still in conversations with New York State legislative body, local delegation to try and move this forward. The percent of the tax is unknown at this time as they're discussing it. There is a 2.6 million unfavorable variance in service charges due to new parking rates not being approved by the Common Council back in July. And then there is a 2.5 million unfavorable variance in fines due to lower collections to date. Now, as I've already mentioned before, there's 11.3 million unfavorable variance in available fund balance. Now, on the expenditure side, there's unfavorable variance of 12.6 million. Under departmental expenditures, that's favorable by 7.1 million. However, as I said earlier, there's a 3.3 million unfavorable variance in the fire department and 1.6 million unfavorable variance in the police department. This is largely attributed to overtime as well, to a lesser extent, their duty disability salary. Now, historically, the vacancies in these departments would allow the city to cover the overtime costs. This year, those overtime costs, not the costs themselves, but they don't have as many vacancies within the department as they brought on both police and fire recruit course classes in the first quarter. So a lot of those vacancies they would have throughout the year aren't there just due to them ramping up their workforce for public safety. Under general charges, it's a $1.9 million favorable variance. Of that, 5.3 is in fringe benefits and personal services. And then there's a 2.1 million favorable variance in utilities. And these favorable variances are offset by a 5.5 million unfavorable variance in other. And that's largely attributed to the 2 legal settlements that occurred this past fall. They were not budgeted for, so the cities had to identify resources within the current operational budget to fund them. And then transfers out are unfavorable by 21.6 million. And this is all attributed to the ARPA programs. And at the end of the year, during closeout, they'll balance that, whatever's expended for ARPA programs will be offset by bringing in the additional ARPA revenue for those programs.
Hey, Bryce, can I ask a question regarding legal settlement?
Yes.
We have an idea as to how much litigation is being filed against the city for, is,
If I can,
Yep.
if I can just interject, I don't know if Ray's change affects this, but Yvette Chambers was invited for executive session today, to discuss that specifically.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Hey, Bryce.
All right. Next slide we have here is just the FTE count as of December 31st. At that time, it was approximately 295 vacancies, almost 11%. Historically, the city averages between 9 to 12% vacancy at the end of the second quarter. Under the police department, there's 38 vacancies, almost 5%. Similar situation with the fire department, 34 vacancies, or 4.6% of the budget for.
Bryce, am I correct? I know the mayor had said that he was looking to cut 10% from each of these budgets, but that would not have shown up in this quarterly report.
That is correct.
I just want to make sure everyone knows that. Okay.
And then just one thing to keep in mind there, and it's covered in the report in detail, even though I mentioned earlier that there were these recruit classes for both police and fire, while these individuals, these candidates are recruits, they're part of the city workforce. They are being paid, they're receiving benefits. However, they're not deployable, as in they're going through their recruit class, and it'll be almost a year and a half before a police officer will be on their own patrolling. Firefighters, it's only a shorter window than that, but 3 to 4 months before they're assigned to a firehouse as their duty station, and are contributing on an active daily versus being in their respective academies.
Thank you.
So in summary, the adopted budget included $22.2 million in potentially overstated revenue. The city reallocated $17.2 million in ARPA funding. This did take Common Council action, which largely addressed those revenues determined to be overestimated. In preparation of the upcoming financial plan, BFSA recommends the administration carefully develop 25-26 budget for your financial plan that includes reasonable estimated revenues and appropriations. And then this is just a summary of the revised schedule of potential overestimated revenues. That amounts down to about $6.4 million, with the largest outlier being the $5.5 million still maintained for the casino revenue. Cannabis tax was taken down significantly, as well were the parking meter fees and traffic violation fees. Those are still areas of risk where revenues may not materialize as closely as they expect at the second quarter. Now, for an outlook for the upcoming 26-29 financial plan, a few recommendations is that this city needs to be aware of. There's a total of $43.1 million to be replaced in one-time revenues and resources. This includes $37 million for ARPA revenue replacement, the use of fund balance at $3.6 million, and then the ARPA real property tax arrears program with $2.5 million, which is in the budget. Those are all one-time resources, and once they are utilized in the current fiscal year, not available going forward. In addition to the revenues, it's recommended that the administration adjust revenue projections for underperformance and collections. Those revenues include the occupancy tax, parking meters and parking meter fees, traffic violation fines and fees, tribal state compact, the casino revenue. Currently, they're still in New York State and the Seneca Nation are still in negotiations on that. Cannabis fines and fees, and then the cannabis tax.
Bryce, maybe for clarification, it says the ARPA revenue replacement, is there $37 million still?
That's the last of it. That's what
The last of it.
because initially it was approximately 19.8 that was adopted in the budget, and then with the Common Council making the changes, the budget modification in December on the ARPA dollars.
Right.
That brought over another 17.2. So that
So that's
obligated,
committed.
it's obligated,
Okay,
we're good on that. That 37 million was obligated before December 31st.
okay, that was the clarification I thought that once they did 17 million, and and I didn't know about the community groups or other.
They were working up against the deadline. Yep,
Okay, so in other words, this 37 million is committed.
Right.
The revenue replacement.
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Continuing on with expenditures that need to be included in the out years of the financial plan, for the upcoming budget and financial plan, labor contracts. There are three significant ones expiring at the end of June 30th, 2025, including TBA, which are the police officers, Local 282, the firefighters, as well as Local 264, the blue collar. So right there, you're looking at over 1,800 budgeted positions within the city. Two have expired at the end of this past fiscal year. That was the white collar, into an extension, the exempts, as well as the crossing guards. Other expenditures that the city needs to account for in the financial plan, review and increase potentially the overtime for public safety, as we've seen over the years, as well as health insurance costs, pension costs, and capital expenditures. Capital expenditures is a recommendation by the BFSA that the city really should look at including some form of capital expenditures, be it for vehicle purchases, potentially demolitions, tree removal and plantings, costs that they can move to the general fund as opposed to always going and bonding for. As was mentioned, there's a delay this year in the issuance of the bonds. So instead of some of these smaller pieces just being wrapped up in the total borrowing, it may make more sense to break it out at the departmental level. Are there any questions on outlooks? My next slide is going to go into the ARPA piece, and I may address some more of your questions, Director Sample. There are none. Just an update as of December 31st, 2024. A reminder, the full award amount was $331.4 million. The full amount was obligated as of December 31st, 2024. Of that, at that time, $250.3 million had been dispersed. At this time, there's approximately 25% of funding allocated for program services and capital projects that have not been dispersed, and that's approximately $81 million. A total of $167.2 million has been obligated and dispersed for revenue replacement, and that's effectively 50.5% of the total award received. It is also recommended that administration corrects errors in the federal quarterly annual report before the next filing.
I mean, I don't know if this is a premature question for the administration. Is it safe to assume that this $81.1 million, I was just curious as to where they're going to get this $17 million for the replacement of all the potholes. Is that coming out of, we know where that goes revenue?
I don't believe those are.
Because that was on the news last night that they're going to have this program of pothole replacement, and they alluded to $17 million, and I didn't know exactly where those funds would be coming from, and I was just curious whether or not, I mean, this is not your question, this is a question for the administration as to where those funds would be coming from for this
I think
project.
a portion of them are, thinking back to last week's caucus where there was some discussion at this with the Public Works Commissioner. I believe a portion of these funds are coming from Public Works General Operations. They were talking about.
Is that a bond sale where they're anticipating, or no?
No, there was no resolution included for whole replacement, and I don't think that would necessarily even come.
Yeah, I don't think
It would, there'd be no
Yeah.
EU on that.
Okay, no, I just didn't understand where the $17 million be coming from, especially when you look at the review of how tight their budget balancing position is. So, I don't know, that was, like I said, I didn't know if this question's premature. When I saw that they're talking about capital projects, dispersed the equivalent of $81 million. I don't know if this maybe would have been the source of the funding for that $17 million pothole replacement.
I don't believe so, but, we'll have to go back to the administration on that, question. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Next couple slides, we're going to touch upon the New York State executive budget and the potential impact of the city of Buffalo. A lot of the talking points you may have heard in the media is that there's additional revenue or resources being sent to local governments. What that is really going to the school districts as well as the county level. There's not as many increases to programs for cities and towns this round. The one area that there is an increase for the city of Buffalo that's tangible is in the state aim allotment. Historically, so this chart here just goes back to fiscal year 2008, where the city's aim allotment was $147.3 million. It'll go up, goes down, but it's been relatively steady at $161.3 million since 2012. This year, fiscal year 25, as well as fiscal year 26, there is an increase of $5 million each year for a temporary increase. All municipalities across the state receive AIM receive some type of increase. It wasn't done proportionally, whatever the state's math was behind it, but Buffalo's allotment for these 2 years is $5 million. I believe the administration is trying to have that maintained at that level, if not have it increased, as are all local towns and cities asking for more.
I guess this would be a good question to ask, given what's going on at the federal level and its impact on the state budget, particularly if we look at the continuing resolution that was passed in the House with huge Medicaid and education cuts. Has anyone said anything or looked at a budget where the state, so for example, the Medicaid cuts could be dramatic to New York State, proportionally if that CR were to continue, it would be a $20 billion cut to the New York State budget. I'm just wondering whether or not or what the city of Buffalo, and you may not know, but what the city of Buffalo is doing in case the worst case scenario comes about. Because I have 40% of the New York State budget is Medicaid, so that if we take a huge hit at the state level, I don't know how the state can then, without cutting, things like AIM, like education funding and others. So I guess I'd like to go on the record as saying that I think we need to relay our concerns that we're going into what looks like a very difficult picture.
Good point.
And another thing is, and I was talking to a number of state legislators over the last 3 weeks, and it does look like what they would like to do is first propose the budget because they have no idea of what will finally come out of the federal government, but to propose a budget along standard lines and then look to make mid-year cuts. But for us in the city, if you're going to make a year's worth of cuts and it's halfway through our budget year, that means we're actually going to make twice as many cuts, or need to make twice as many cuts as what's proposed out there. And I think it's important for us to put up the warning signs now that this is going to be a very difficult thing to do, and we may want to recommend not just to the mayor's office, but also the Common Council to have some serious discussions about what would happen and what would be an alternative plans if something happens. It seems to me that it would be prudent for not just BFSA, but the council and the mayor's office and the Division of Finance to start having discussions so that if this does happen, that we have a plan that's been thought out and not done at the last minute because all of a sudden we've waited to see what happens. I understand that's difficult, and I understand that we don't want the public to worry about all of these things until they have to, but it doesn't mean that we can't at least quietly start to have these discussions and start to plan. I would suggest that we would probably want to talk to the county executive as well, because they would be in the same position with all of us to see what was going to be the impact on everyone in Western New York, because we need a plan for Western New York. Sorry.
Do we have, has anybody, not from our staff, but from the city, had discussions with some of our local state representatives come in or senators relative to this possibility? We know whether or not?
I'm unsure if there's been any discussions in regards to the federal reductions or what's going on at the federal level between the administration and the local delegation.
Because it's been kind of unusually silent that no one has weighed in on these potential, I'll say, cuts to the state's responsibilities and how it's going to impact the rest of us, which, Chairman, you made a good point. And, someone's got to be saying something, or at least figuring out, what the consequences and alternatives would be to, keep on the right track. So,
I don't want to scare people, and I'm not sure that the continuing resolution that came out of the House is what's going to end up. I mean, I don't think that's going to be that bad, but even if it's half as bad as what is in that continuing resolution,
you got to be prepared for it.
We've got to be prepared for it, because cuts in Title I aid, which goes to education, and the cuts to Medicaid represent about 70% of the state's budget. We don't realize the pass-through effect of the federal government on the state budget, and just how little money and flexibility the state has above and beyond what's going on. So, yes, I thank you, and I think we do need to say that we need to start working together to put together a plan. So, yes.
I know it's still this time, but the point is so well taken and has not been enunciated enough. I know, just coming back from Albany and all those virtual lobbying, every district, just like Buffalo, is scrambling to cut their deficits next year. They're pounding the legislators with those very short-term needs. No one is even thinking about that, which you might think, well, God, you guys aren't too bright, but it's like, well, how many battles can you fight? But you guys are both right, and great points. No one's thinking that way. And I think the executive budget from the state is going to be lower. Or the final legislative budget is going to be lower than.
Thank you. Continue if you would.
Yeah, so just following up on that point, what was proposed in the executive budget could likely change to quite a degree by the enacted budget. As a reminder, the enacted budget is supposed to be in place by April 1st, so we're 3 weeks out from a deal supposedly being negotiated. So we want to start reviewing some of the proposed revenue actions in there. Tribal State Compact, as I mentioned earlier, is still being negotiated. The short-term extension that was in place expired March 31st, 2024, almost a full year ago. Unknown what the next iteration of this compact agreement will look like. Funds are currently being held in escrow as the two parties continue to negotiate a new deal. New York State advanced the city of Buffalo $5.6 million in October of 2024, and the city administration is in discussions with New York State Division of Budget, requesting the balance of that amount, 5.4, to be advanced by June of 2025.
Right.
Yes.
That advanced 5.6, was that an advance on the money being held in escrow, or was that a true advance of future compact up?
It was my understanding, and I could be wrong, and I have to verify this with the administration, it was an advancement of what was being held.
Okay, so real money.
Real money, correct.
Okay,
correct.
well, that's better.
Yes. Moving on. Yeah, that's what please. So some other local government financing, we have the state aim over financial plan. So the first of the state's upcoming financial plan fiscal year 26, there's an additional $5 million. So we'll increase AIM up to 166.3. And after that, 3 remaining years of the financial plan, it's going back down to 161.3 million. There's also a affordable home buyer tax incentive in the executive budget. It proposes that this property tax incentive that localities can opt into to bring down costs for home buyers, accelerate local construction projects. This will allow municipalities to utilize DASNY, Planning, Design, Procurement, and Construction Management Service to streamline project completion. Well, please. Moving on, incentivize site development. This is really targeted at counties, but budget continues $50 million for site development, preparation grants for collaboration with the state to support county infrastructure, projects that have a public benefit, including housing, healthcare, and treatment facilities. Still providing additional cybersecurity support, requires local governments to report all cybersecurity incidents through a centralized mechanism, as well as requiring all state and local employees to complete annual cybersecurity training. The state's gun-involved violence elimination GIVE program. The budget maintains $50 million in state funding to support 20 police departments, 17 counties outside of New York City. As I said earlier, a lot of these programs are carried forward without new revenues or resources going into them.
Yeah, that was the point I wanted to make. I mean, these are all designated funding sources, but not to balance budgets, or at least.
No.
They're designed for specific purposes that can't be used or designated for anything other than what the project is.
Definitely right outside of the general fund operations. Right?
Okay.
The next two, maintaining the countywide shared services match. Now, it looks like the state's looking at wrapping this up, so they will be receiving projects up through March 31st, 2026. Then there's the anti-poverty initiatives, continuing the $50 million new funding support targeted anti-poverty initiatives in Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. Continuing funding for transportation funding, chip space, transit operating aid, state touring routes aid, and advertising and Pave New York. So no serious increases of those, but continuation of prior year rate amounts. This is, as I said, continuing prior year initiatives, eliminating duplicative overlapping governments. We have the local government efficiency grants, citizens reorganization empowerment grants, citizen empowerment tax credits, and the municipal restructuring fund. So nothing new, really just a continuation of prior years. Now I went through those rather quickly. Do we have any questions from the directors?
In your discussions, were there any new initiatives that the city's going to be proposing that they might get funded that would help relieve some of the financial pressures?
City initiatives, not at this time, as they are in the process of preparing the 25-26 budget and that corresponding financial plan. So they haven't tipped their hand to me yet, but we'll see those initiatives April 8th.
But obviously, they need to, if they're going to ask the state for additional monies, they would have needed to do it well before the April 1st budget.
Correct.
Or they wouldn't be in the budget. So there may be some of those things.
Yeah. At this time, that brings me to the end of the city piece. No more questions, I'll hand it off to Mitch.
All right. So we'll now move to district items, including the review of the second quarter report and the proposed aid within the New York State executive budget. The report on the second quarter is located under tab 4 in your board book. Mr. Jim Behrens, the district CFO, is present today, and he can answer any of your questions. Jim, would you like to just sit up here?
Sure.
Maybe? That would be great. Thank you.
Can I bring my notes?
You can bring your notes.
Trip me up.
We're not going to say you're cheating. So,
Thank you.
Nathan?
The tech is working, appears to be. Great. Good afternoon, everybody. The following is an overview of the Buffalo City School District's fiscal year 25 second quarter results. We'll start off with some key findings. Key finding number one, the district is not forecasting revenues dissimilar to what's included within the adopted budget. BFSA examinees, our analysis showed that it may be slightly less than budget, but not significantly so. Finding number two, district is forecasting a favorable $10 million expenditure budgetary variance. BFSA's examination of that goes a little bit deeper and forecasts just under a $40 million expenditure variance, barring any unforeseen or unbudgeted new expenditures, of course. This table here lays out what was originally included within the modified budget, and this shows the district's projected fiscal year end results along with BFSA's. So, budget was adopted with an $83.4 million deficit. Their projected fiscal year end is, of course, $10 million, or their budget variance is $10 million off that, and as I mentioned, our BFSA's is more than that, 35.2. There will be a actual deficit in the current fiscal year. Okay, next key finding is that the city was requested to approve the district's capital plan in the amount of $55.4 million. Common Council approved this in December. We're noting that New York State reimburses the school district approximately 97% of all of these expenditures in the form of New York State building aid. There's no cost to the city of Buffalo. The requested bond sale was decreased to a net of $42.2 million due to timing issues. The Da Vinci project did not meet timing requirements as the lease had not yet been executed. Included in the request are 27 individual projects with an estimated $94 million combined maximum cost. So the excess of what will be borrowed will be funded by the general fund.
Can I ask a little bit about Da Vinci? So if this bond hasn't been approved, are they going forward, and what are we doing with the students who are leaving Bugle and going to Buffalo State?
Sure. It was a very aggressive schedule to get all these projects in line, A&E designs done, sent to the state, and have the state review them. So we didn't make all the deadlines, Da Vinci being one. I just wanted to give that background for myself. Now, where are we? We have to get a ground lease signed by this new Da Vinci Corporation, and then we need to get the actual lease signed. We are working on a daily basis with SUNY and the new corporation to get that done. So say that gets done within a month's time. In my conversations with the controller staff, not the controller, we haven't been communicating, with the controller staff, once those leases are signed and approved by SUNY and our board, we submit those leases along with the other information that's already been submitted, and we will get a bond resolution. But it'll be considered authorized but unissued, not in time for the May 25 bonding, but almost assured to be sold as a bond in May of 26. But what that authorized and unissued status provides the district is a legal and accounting mechanism to front the money from the general fund, but be repaid from the bond proceeds next year. So as of right now.
Through an interfund loan?
Exactly.
So is the project on schedule?
Yeah, the designs and everything have been completed and submitted. We got an initial, maximum cost allowance from the state. It's the leases that are holding.
Okay.
What's the cost of the project, Jim?
44.
44 million?
And as of right now, that's a board and superintendent, priority. Yeah.
And that's because of why? You got kicked out of some school?
Well, yes, but, my colleague Will Caresses can give the most eloquent example, but Fred, maybe you know as much. You want me to take a shot first?
Go ahead.
The program, the high school program was designed to be on a college campus. It was integral to its success, and its success has been great. 99.9% graduation rate. And it offers a unique program to our city residents. So Fred could probably elaborate more convincingly than me, but it's a great program designed to be on a college campus, and our superintendent says, why not the best for Buffalo students?
And so they're moving from D'Youville, where there were some building issues. And so therefore, this was the most reasonable alternative, and they're putting the program back into what was called the campus school. And they're rebuilding up to make sure that it's appropriate.
Which is on the Buff State campus?
It's on the Buffalo State campus, right off of Grant Street.
So what's the problem with, Duville? Was that, capacity or?
They changed their
Bill,
plan.
I think some of the buildings needed to be reconstructed, and it was gonna be too expensive to continue the program. And so this was a way of moving the program back where originally the campus school was a Buffalo public school. So they're basically moving back to where they were.
Okay.
And I should add, the project, way before, we got going on designs or, building aid or all the contentiousness, among some parties, this has got the backing of the governor and John King. Special legislation was passed. So there's an awful lot of people who really wanted to see this done. It seems like all that work has been forgotten.
My only concern is that the students won't be able to go to D'Youville or Buffalo State, and there won't be a place for them unless we build out the Buffalo State campus. And waiting months and months and months, I would hate to see us start the project and then not have the students there when the school year starts.
How long has the program been in existence? Duville? I mean, is it successful?
Yeah.
Yeah, 99.9% graduation, super high parent satisfaction.
And college faculty, what this has allowed both with the D'Youville faculty, and you should realize that D'Youville faculty, a few years ago, got rid of their education program, and most of those faculty members moved to Buffalo State. So this is just moving to a place where there is an education faculty that then works with the Buffalo public teachers and the BTF to try to really develop.
So it's a worthwhile program?
It's a very worthwhile
Worth the
program.
investment?
And it's been going for about 20 to 25 years, somewhere around in there. And it's had a lot of success, so.
Moving along, the next key finding, we've reported this throughout the year, but district enrollment was significantly higher at the start of the current school year than at the end of the prior school year. This chart shows the last few years of both Buffalo public and area public charter school enrollment. Enrollment was 29,649 as of December 7th, about little over 3% lower than the September 30th estimate. However, we note that if enrollment remains at or near this level, it will mark the first time within the last 10 school years where enrollment has increased year over year, albeit not by a great percentage amount. The school district has daily monitoring of attendance and participation. All this data is calculated by all the districts, then given to NICET, who reviews and certifies the results.
I update you on enrollment?
Yes.
The most up to date, as this became a contentious point, erroneous information was being passed around about this account. So we're up, according to the beds counts, the most conservative count, we're up 267 students from the prior year, first time in 7 years. And in our infinite campus basis, which measures beds plus kids that come in after that date, we're up about 470.
Thank you. The final finding is that this budget represents year 1 of 2, focused on the superintendent's right-sizing initiative. So it's reducing total staff counts at both the schools and the central office by eliminating vacancies, not filling positions that become vacant through retirements, eliminating 36 where TOSAs or teacher on special assignment positions at the school, and then continuing a superintendent-imposed hiring freeze for non-essential staff. That's the final key finding, and I can summarize it, move along to some outlook items as well. In summary, BFSA has no concerns related to the district's projections for the current fiscal year. The district has the ability and has demonstrated the ability to fund the projected deficits with reserves, and has addressed the operational imbalance within its annual financial plan as well. The district will likely report a larger budgetary surplus compared to what is currently being reported based on actual employee compensation benefits and the charter school tuition expenditures.
And Nathan, when is the teacher and aides contracts and principals contracts up?
Fortunately, I have that right on the next slide.
Thank you.
Yes.
June 30th, 2026?
Yeah. So, factors impacting the upcoming financial plan. Well, for starters, the superintendent is retiring, so the search for a new superintendent has just begun officially. Along with that, yes, all contracts are settled right now, but they begin to expire at the end of the current year. That includes the BCSA, which is the Administrators Union. At the end of the 25-26 year, teacher contract expires. So, all within the next 3 fiscal years.
So they're going to need at least some of those surpluses to be able to close these contracts. And I think that's an important thing to note, is that if we want to have good labor relations, and we obviously want to have the best teachers and principals and superintendent that we can have for our students, that it's important for us to keep these surpluses and realize that they're really being held in abeyance for future costs that we're going to need to be able to pay for. And I think this,
Providing which those cuts at the federal level impact what's going to happen on these unsettled contracts.
and all of this can.
And your fund balance.
And your fund balance, yeah. So this is going to be a very difficult time, I think. But I do think that the board wants to thank the superintendent. The superintendent has been a great partner with this board. She has met with us on numerous occasions, and I think she has moved the district forward in a very positive way, and we wish her all the best and wish she would stay. But we understand that it may be time, but we want to make sure that everyone knows how well she has worked with us and how much we appreciate the work that she's done.
On her behalf, that's going to mean a lot to her. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then just a couple more items. These have all been touched upon, but of course there is the potential disruption at the federal level, which has been discussed earlier. The current financial plan projected structural imbalances in the out years The gap was projected to narrow next year, but it is contingent on continuation of the right sizing initiative, which includes closing 2 public schools and eliminating an additional 250 teacher positions, either through attrition or layoffs. That's included within the current financial plan. If there's no further questions, I can move along with the executive budget update.
Go ahead.
Okay. This summarizes the governor's executive budget proposed actions. It was released back on January 21st, 2025. Total school aid statewide would increase to $37.4 billion, a $1.7 billion or just under 5% increase overall. Foundation aid, the largest aid, which is the operating aid, would increase just under $1.5 billion or about 5.9% overall across the state. There's some formula revisions that were proposed after a study, and I won't get into that, but it basically proposes to update some of the measures within the formula to more accurately distribute aid. Statewide free school meals would increase up to $340 million under the proposal.
Is there a breakdown as to how much each school district will be getting, like the city?
Yes.
Yes.
If you go to the Division of Budgets page, they have a school run right underneath the AIM run, and you can look at that. The other part of this proposal from the Rockefeller Institute and in the governor's budget was also a proposal to hold harmless all of the school districts, at least for this and presumably next year. And after that, then this may change again, so we need to be monitoring this as well.
Yeah, the net of all formula-based aids, aside from, of course, the foundation aid, would be increased at the statutory minimum, 3.2%, and then same thing with all categorical grant programs. For charter schools, there would be an increased aid to districts with charter school students through the supplemental tuition and facilities aid reimbursement program. That would be an additional facility aid increase from New York City. Well, in the proposal. This table shows the proposed state aid just for Buffalo. It includes on the far left side the actual aid received by category. It shows what the executive budget proposes. It will then, we worked with the school district. The school district came up with a recalculation of the number that believes it's more accurate, revised the state aid run down somewhat. So using the district's number, there would be about a $34.8 million increase or 3.7%. Largely, of course, that is from the foundation aid increase. This might be a little busy, so I'll just walk through it. We wanted to take a look at all the aid per pupil based for the big four school districts, Buffalo, Syracuse, Yonkers, Rochester. And I broke it down by an estimated enrollment for next year. Bottom table shows what the dollar amount per pupil is. Now, you'll notice that Buffalo is, if you can see that, it's similar to Syracuse. Rochester is much higher in their per pupil aid. They have, just the foundation aid was about $22,000. Buffalo is just under $19,000. Syracuse is just over $19,000. Reached out to NICED for explanation to see why that would be, considering the districts are so incredibly similar, and no great answer given other than we're following the formula, and that was what was provided. So it's something that I look to, and I'd like an explanation. Maybe the formulas are a little different, but they don't appear to be that much. To explain that.
Well, a lot of this, is that based on poverty levels? in Rochester is a bigger poverty level in the city of Buffalo?
They're doing very well in the city itself.
It's kind of just,
Yes, that's a factor in foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they changed the foundation aid formula to go away from the percentage of people getting free lunch to now using census data and looking at it. And that's had an adjustment in a lot of different places. It's particularly important in rural areas where some people really have gotten this messed up. The problem with the old formula was you had to sign up for free lunches. So if you had poor families who didn't sign up, school district didn't get the extra money. So there was always this chasing of your tail to be able to get the money that was obviously needed for these families.
what about enrollment? I mean, what's the enrollment of like Rochester? Wouldn't that be
Yes.
significantly less than what we have?
But they may not have as many charter school students in the city versus the county. So there's a number of things that we'd have to look at.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
maybe we can sit down with the formulas and go over the run and see where the differences are. I'm more than happy to help you with that.
Great. And I think that's our last slide, and I don't know if there are any other questions or comments.
Tim, do you have anything you'd like to add?
you guys do a really good job ripping through our numbers and plans. There won't be school closings in 25, 26. There's not enough, because of all the constituencies we gotta please, there's not enough time to do it appropriately, but they are priority number one for the following year. In the short term, Nathan expressed it very clearly, what we need to do to get down to a $30 million deficit. We're currently, before we even start cutting and discussing, we're envisioning a $117 million deficit, then work down from there. We have some programs and plans that we can put in place, but it's gonna be another tough budget.
Well, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we're looking forward to seeing your next report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, person.
We'll now move to a discussion to be held with Bureau Management regarding the process of the lead hazards grant. The detailed letter on this item was provided by Senior Director Hope Watkins under tab 5 of your board book. To the representatives from Bureau.
You resend it to Tracy. It was on, then removed. So we're working on that right now.
We'll work on,
Just received a text from them about that.
okay, so they will be on in a few minutes.
Yep, they're trying to right now.
Would you
Yep.
like to start then?
You have somebody in the waiting room?
Yep, thanks. So go ahead, minimize this. This is.
You want the presentation here as well?
No, because they were presenting. So I believe that's Ms. Watkins there.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Watkins. You want to go ahead and start? Do we need?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. We were hoping and asking that you could kind of walk through the levy mediation grant and where you're at with that and what your intent is in terms of getting that extended and getting that program rolled out in accordance with the deadline.
So the lead remediation grant is currently under one of its extensions as we speak. You're aware of that piece, right?
Yes.
that is currently in one. So, when that grant got extended, we did quite a bit to make some modifications to be able to bring in or remove some of the limitations that were causing the restriction. And we've done very well with that. We are definitely moving forward and have a lot more momentum. The changes were accepted by, the office and our grant provider. And so at this point, what we believe is that with a little continued time, we will actually successfully be able to fulfill the requirements of it. It took us a little time to get up to speed because we had to make those changes, get them out to the community, and of course, then get the community familiar with what they could now do differently for the policies that we changed. So I think at this point, I was trying to find some numbers for you, and I apologize. My program manager for lead is not available to join us. But at this point, I know we've moved the numbers significantly. It was like in the very first stages, only 1 to 3, and we're somewhere in the range of probably 11 active and probably an additional 11 in a pending or moving forward because we're a little over 20 or so that we have. So that will continue to move. It is our intention, because we now have the availability of the whole city instead of certain census tract to work in at the permission granted to extend to the city, that we continue this work for approximately another year and complete those 90 units that we agreed to do in totality for what we have. We also have some new components that we can add because of programs such as our vacant rental property program that we have now been awarded, which will also assign and come close in connection with lead, helping us to achieve those numbers. So we do expect to ask for another extension, and we're hopeful that they will grant it.
Thank you. Can we ask, have you gotten any directives from HUD given the cuts that have been discussed at the federal level? Or is there going to be any impact on Bureau?
So we have not received yet anything that tells us anything is changing for us at this exact moment. We are very much aware, and so we're staying cognizant that things could change based on what we hear. However, what was sent to us even during that, I'm going to say that initial week where everybody kind of got the surprise that federal funding may change, what was sent to us was just a hold tight until something happens, you're good to go. And if anything changes, we'll let you know. That came from the grant provider to us. As far as our other programmatic things, we've heard nothing yet as far as needing to cease, change, or modify. We are proceeding to serve the community as we always have, using our funding at this time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There are other questions? Issues? Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem. If there's anything else, please feel free to call. I do apologize for jumping on late. We had to sign into a different computer.
No problems. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a great day.
You too.
You too.
The final agenda item before our executive session is the review of the second quarter report of the Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority. The BFSA staff report on this item is provided under tab 6 of your board book. Nathan, will you lead us through that, please?
Certainly. I wanted to point out that we do have the Deputy Executive Director Vanessa Candelario on the Zoom call as well. I lost my screen. We have it back. Excellent. Good Good afternoon again. The following is the BFSA's review of the Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority's current fiscal year second quarter. We'll start off with some key findings. Big finding is that the BMHA is operating within its overall budget. Second quarter results, revenues exceeded budget to date by $800,000. Total expenses were $500,000 less than budget to date. Thank you. Okay. Second finding is that the Marine Drive budget reported an operating loss of $500,000. This loss was about $400,000 greater than what had been anticipated. BMHA attributes this to greater than anticipated needs, including general expenses, maintenance expenses, administrative expenses, and utility. Revenues were actually favorable by $700,000 as rental receipts exceeded the budget to date by about $600,000. And we point out that Marine Drive does not have reserves to cover the losses. The central office will need to continue, central office cost center will need to continue to cash flow assist Marine Drive. And then we got an update on this. As of December 2024, Marine Drive currently owes the COCC approximately $2.8 million. This is just how the Marine Drive actual to date at the end of second quarter repair. Next key finding is that BMHA had a just over 15% employee vacancy rate, or about 24 positions. The vacancy rate is typically anywhere between 10 and 25%. This is on the lower end of that. More pronounced in capital improvements by percentage, as there's about 3 vacant positions. In terms of workforce, asset management had a greater number of actual vacant positions. BMHA reported revenues of $30.7 million as of December 31st. Consolidated revenues were $800,000 greater than the budgeted to date amount, or about 51.4% of budgeted revenues. This is on an overall basis between the 4 components. Expenses were $28.5 million at the end of the second quarter, or about $500,000 less than the budget to date, or about 49% of budget expenses. The summary is that the asset management program operating segment is operating within its budget. The COCC is reporting higher than budget operating loss of about $100,000. That's about 50% higher than reported. Some of it is due to rounding, and some of it is due to timing. Marine Drive is operating considerably over budget and has reported a net loss of $500,000. Exceeds the budget to date amount by 400% and the annual budget by 200%. And as we mentioned, the COCC has been and will continue to need to cash flow assist the COCC, or the Marine Drive. Well, just to point out some of the challenges coming up with the new financial plan, all labor contracts are current. They will expire over the next 4 years, and that date is the end of 27-28, which sounds like it's a distant time off, but it really isn't, now that we're already knee-deep into 2025. Marine Drive adopted budget and financial plan. The cumulative 4-year budgeted net operating loss of $800,000 is projected in the current plan. And as we mentioned, they do get cash flow assistance, and they need to repay whatever is being borrowed to the COCC. The COCC adopted budget is not balanced overall either. There's a budgeted operating loss of about $500,000, but when you factor in all the other components, it's a cash flow inflow of $100,000. I breezed through that. If there are any questions I can answer, and as I mentioned, we do have Modesto on the line.
Nathan, do they have a fund balance? Do you have an accumulated fund balance or an unassigned fund balance or, you know, to help with whatever short-term?
We're sure we're talking about Marine Drive or overall?
Overall.
Overall, there is for AMP. Marine Drive does not have, has reserves.
But the overall can be distributed in the event that, right? No?
No, they cannot.
No,
Okay,
they're unique for sure.
Okay.
So like the AMP budget operates individually. It's almost like the general fund.
Okay.
And then you got central office, and each one has to balance individually, and they can't share funding between.
Okay, no, I'm totally not familiar with the structural side of their finances. So, I mean, obviously, they look like they're performing, but I don't know if they have an accumulated fund balance that could be applied towards whatever shortcomings they have.
Can I ask the vacancy rate question, not just at Marine Drive, but at all of the institutions? It's our George Arthur question for today. I think it's important that we're providing as many people with housing as we can.
Did you say Modesto's on the line?
He is.
Modesto, would you mind discussing vacancies a little bit?
Yes, I can. Yeah, our challenge in filling vacancies, frankly, a lot stem from the fact that we are limited to working with the civil service process. We get positions filled in sometimes, and once the test comes out, people, don't get to the top, and those that get to the top do not want to work at BMHA. So it's sort of like a revolving door to some degree here. So it's become a challenge for us. So we continue to offset, though I will say that the services to the residents are offset with third-party vendors and contractors. So it's not as though we are, by the position not being filled, that the service is not being provided.
Thank you, Modesto. I guess I'm wondering how many vacant rental properties at each of our places are we keeping up with our goals of having all of our units rented? Can you give us an update on that, please?
Overall, we're falling short. Overall, we're falling short of our goal of occupancy. A large part of that has to deal with we're still dealing with the effects of COVID. We have a large number of families that have very large arrears, and as the courts now are starting to take on the cases, we are seeing in some instances more move-outs than move-ins. And so we are aware of that challenge. And as a matter of fact, we are working as we speak on a vacancy reduction program that will involve a vacant unit turnaround contract that we hope to get out in the streets to turn over the units a lot faster than we can right now. But the major problem is that as we move people in, we are unfortunately having to evict others for non-payment of rent.
I was just, Modesto, it's Andy Sanfilippo. How are you?
How you doing, Andy?
But I asked that was going to be a question of mine is, what is the delinquency rate on rental payments? Is that significant or?
Very significant. We ended the last fiscal year with almost a 25% tenant accounts receivable to tenant rents. Right now, we're about $2.8 million the last time we looked at it on the tenant accounts receivable balance. So it's a continuing problem. We still have families that we're trying to get to that have large balances from COVID.
Is there like an eviction process? I would think that would have to be pretty difficult to execute an eviction for non-payment of rent.
Yeah, it is, and the courts, provide the tenants, the residents, a lot of opportunities to make whole, but the residents get to stay for a long period of time until we get to them.
So what happens to these? Yeah, what happens to these poor families then once they're no longer in subsidized housing with you?
they'll go into the private market. I mean, we cannot have residents that do not pay the rent. The regulations do not allow for that. We cannot, not collect their rent.
I understand, but do you have any estimates on what's happening to the homeless population then in the city of Buffalo because of these arrear programs? Do we know how many families are now out on the streets because they don't have the funding to be able to go into the private market?
We do not have those numbers. We can work with the Homeless Coalition. They track that sort of information and see what impact it's having. But we don't track the homeless population numbers.
I mean, it's obvious that we're trying to help people and that COVID has caused a large degree of stress on our system. So it would be good for us to, as people are leaving, if we could understand what's happening to them, and you might have some individual stories. I think that would be an important part of keeping the discussion going, because the obvious thing here is that we want to help families who are in need. And I would hate to see us not being able to do that and somehow them slipping through the cracks. And so anything you could do in that line, Modesto, as you're going through your process, we would like to hear about.
Okay, well, we'll get some information, but I would say that, since COVID, we have been working very diligently with the resident population to try to avoid any kind of eviction. As you know, we asked the city to make some resources available to us, and they did, and we have used some of those resources to help some families. We cannot, quite frankly, cannot understand why some families have not either taken advantage of the resources that are available and not paying. So it's really, we have a lot of cases that they just do not take advantage of the resources that are available and would not pay the rent either.
Well, yeah,
but
thank you, Modesto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
go ahead. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, thank you, Modesto. This is a hard thing to crack, and we want to make sure that we help as many families as possible. And maybe the bureaucracy sometimes is just too hard for them to get through, given their life experiences. And if we can figure out some way to help them, I think that's on us. So, thank you.
We're doing everything in our power to assist families. We're in the business of helping families. That's house families. That's what we want to do. We are restricted by the regulations, and we try to find the help that they need. It's just some of these cases are, we just cannot explain them, to be honest with you.
And we understand, and we know that you're doing everything you can, and we know that the regulations are important. We just need to be able to show this and talk to people, because maybe we can help some other families and help some children as we go forward. That's our only part in it. Thank you.
Thanks, Modesto.
Thank you.
So we can now move into executive session. So I would ask the staff to stay, but I would ask that the televisions and recording devices be turned off at this point.
For clarification,
Yes.
one executive session is done.
Yes,
Right.
we will come. We're going to come back and then adjourn. So if you wanted to leave now, you wouldn't miss anything.
Oh, okay.
I'm just, you can wait outside if you want. We're not saying you can't come back, but I'd hate for you to wait for half an hour for two lines and then wonder what was going on. So thank you.
Thank you.